Adonai, Suri ve'goali, Suri.
We're asking you to do something that you might not be totally comfortable with, which is to share your stories, to share your personal and your private life with the people around you who you call your community. So it's a community call to action, a community called to community.
There's a time to remember and there's a time to talk about those stories, but ultimately we have to move beyond that and stand up and act. That's exactly what community organizing is.
Adonai, Suri ve'goali.
We seem to live to work rather than working to live, and I think that struck a chord with so many folks. It seemed to me that that was happening across socioeconomic levels, that it seemed like no matter where folks were in their lives and in terms of what they were doing, everyone seemed to feel like there wasn't enough and they had to keep working and they had to keep moving, and that left little room in their lives to connect with others.
Suddenly things are a little different in our lives. And we're kept up at night, both of us, by, it sounds silly, but math, simple mathematics. You know, we have an addition coming to our family in March, and it should be the most happy occasion in our lives, but the numbers are daunting. My wife, if she wants to stay at home with the baby, a huge subtraction, or if she's half-time, what are the alternatives? This addition of costs associated with daycare.
God willing, I'll live long, but if I live long, can I afford to live long? It's just a question that pops up all the time, and that's never been my strong suit, is planning for those things. I'm sort of an artistic personality, so I've let those things go a bit, and I have to really take care of them now. So that's a big concern. When I entered junior high school, I was put into a program with a music teacher who was extraordinary and taught us what's known as the Kodai-Orff method of sight reading and sight singing and rhythm training, and we sang in choirs. There were 7 orchestras in the school. There were art exhibitions all the time. There were concerts twice a year, huge concerts with big choral pieces and orchestra pieces, and oh gosh, you can't buy that. You can't pay for that. It was free. It was free education.
I, in some ways, feel vulnerable, both for myself for the rest of this year and for the people I know at my schools and for younger kids, because I can see programs being cut when you go to a public school. Is you get your textbook and you learn, don't write in it because somebody else has to use them. And as you can tell from looking at the books, you're definitely not the first person to use them.
We love it here in California. We love San Francisco, and we're both products of public schools and public education and strong ties to our community. And we moved out here, and we're both many thousands of miles away from our family. And when we were first getting together and first talking about getting married and what our future was going to look like, one of the things that we both agreed upon was that we really wanted the same thing for our kids that we had, which is strong connection to our community, good public schools, good public education. And when we look around in San Francisco, we really weren't confident that that was something we could give our kid. We have a feeling that the next 5 years for us don't include the city of San Francisco.
While I'm committed to public education and think the only way that we can have a country where equal opportunity is a promise that's real is to have public schools that everybody wants to go to, I don't think that means that I sacrifice my kids' education for that ideal. And so we are exploring all of those options, but we aren't in a position where it's going to be easy to afford a private school, and aren't really comfortable settling for a public school that we would think is not going to give our kids what we think they deserve in terms of an education. So we're struggling with that. We don't know what we're going to do.
One of the biggest challenges that we face today is that we feel more and more isolated. We feel more removed from one another. We can feel like we're in these confined spaces. And even though we want to reach out and we want to connect with one another, at times it can feel like there's not a way to get there.
I moved out to San Francisco 15 years ago and knew almost nobody. And for me, as a Jew, Judaism is family, it's community, it's ritual. And all of those are wrapped into Tikkun Olam as well. But I didn't have a Jewish community, and it took actually several years before I started to build one.
I think anyone who's alone at a certain age is very concerned about growing old alone and illness and who will take care of me and will I be able to afford decent housing at that point, and will insurance cover illness? So those things are on my mind, and financial considerations. How will I take care of myself? Will I have enough?
I have a 3-year-old and I have a 7-month-old, and I get to see them way, way less than I want to. And the work that I do demands that I'm there late. A lot of the work that I do is in conversation with community members, parents, and teachers after the school day ends, and going to meetings and things like that after the school day ends. And I end up getting home very late. And on good days, I have an hour before bedtime with my kids. And on good days, I have a half an hour in the morning with my kids before I have to leave. And that's not right, and it's not fair. To them, it's not right, and it's not fair to me. And I also feel very committed to this school that I helped start, and don't feel like I can stop doing that work. So it's sort of a feeling of being stuck.
A particular day in my life, it was the day that represented the subtraction of my father from my life. It was his yahrzeit, and I hadn't told anybody that day about my father's yahrzeit. I don't know why I didn't tell anybody about it, but when I look back, I think maybe there was no one to tell. Again, we find it frightening times by how small our community seems to have become.